The mainstream conversation on net neutrality is flared back up once again, and at the core of this debate is Title II of the Communications Act of 1934. Title II is the legal foundation on which the FCC enacted the Open Internet Order of 2015. These orders are basically a set of rules put in place for ISPs that move towards the establishment of the internet neutrality concept. There have been multiple sort of open internet orders throughout the years. The Open Internet Order of 2015 actually is based upon the one from 2010. So, this is something that's sort of building up as we sort of understand what our net neutrality needs are. Title II of the Communications Act concerns something called common carriers, which also covers utilities like landline phones and electricity. The 2015 Open Internet Order reclassified broadband internet service under Title II. It was actually previously classified under Title I as an information service. Those two distinctions are actually quite big because it also involves the governing body, or rather the regulatory body that oversees this sort of net neutrality concept. Repealing Title II would strip broadband service providers of the common carrier designation and restore FTC jurisdiction over their privacy practices. Before this, the FTC was the regulatory body watching ISPs, and to be quite honest, they did quite a bad job of it, allowing for ISPs such as Verizon to block services such as VoIP in sort of previous rulings. One argument that gets brought up with this whole conversation is that the FTC understands the scope of net neutrality, and we can sort of trust these companies, we can trust these ISPs to sort of adhere to these sort of unspoken rules, if you will, and the FTC will be able to step in if necessary. There are enough rules in place for them to step in. If you look to see the scope of the FTC's duties, they have quite a lot of things under their control, and it would be very difficult for them to actually enforce any sort of net neutrality rules that may or may not get broken in the future. One of the core principles of net neutrality is non-discrimination. Websites and online service providers must be treated equally by the pipe that carries them to and from the end user. But non-discrimination is not required by the FTC and sort of the antitrust laws that they're supposed to govern. Here's an excerpt from the Act. Today, our forbearance approach results in over 700 codified rules being inapplicable. A light touch approach for the use of Title II. This includes no unbundling of last mile facilities, no tariffing, no rate regulation, and no cost accounting rules, which result in a carefully tailored application of only those Title II provisions found to directly further the public interest in an open internet. This is Title II tailored for the 21st century. So I think it's very interesting because Title II was fought because it allowed for protection to be in place for the consumer, as well as companies. Think about startups, think about consumers that want to go to any service that they want without sort of any opposing forces. And those opposing forces could be stuff such as throttling or even blocking of a service. I think a perfect example here is when Morocco banned WhatsApp, Viber, Skype, and Facebook Messenger. They did it because there were no protections in place. They also did it because they knew that the telecom companies would benefit from it. This allowed for the telecom industry in Morocco to hold on to their tight grip over the communications market. Very similarly here in the United States, there have been attempts to throttle applications that didn't align with a company's interests. Think back to Comcast versus Netflix in 2015, in which Netflix actually ended up paying Comcast money. Comcast sort of extorted them for money because Comcast had interests. They had other interests that they were set to profit off of. So this is one way that Comcast sort of found a way to profit off of Netflix's success. Another example is Comcast and Cox Communications throttling BitTorrent back in 2007 and 2008. This resulted in the FCC taking them to court, and then Comcast saying that they had no hard rules that dictated what they could do with their own network management. They being the FCC. Network management, in this case, you may have heard the term traffic shaping, where you're sort of looking at a specific service and saying, I want to shape this traffic and allow it to have less priority in the network. In this case, with torrenting services, it was throttled extremely hard just because of the volume of traffic that they saw going over these peer-to-peer networks. Regarding traffic shaping, keep in mind that that is actually all defined under those network management practices in Title II. Think if you're trying to visit Google versus visiting Bing. If Google loads perhaps 2 seconds slower for you, you're more than likely going to switch to the other provider simply because, it's quicker, ease of use. And it's something that is not necessarily sort of, it's heavy-handed, but you don't necessarily see it. you don't necessarily see that the company is throttling. There's a reason ISPs are spending millions of dollars in swaying our thoughts and swaying our emotions and, investing all this money into think tanks. They've been doing this for years. And the reason why is because they are set to profit off of the reversal of Title II. It's plain and simple as that. Don't allow the FCC to overturn net neutrality rules that were put in place. In the description down below, I'm going to provide more information for you all regarding Title I and Title II, the differences between each, and I'm going to provide you links to the actual papers talking about them in length. I'm also going to provide you some of my resources that I used during this video. I hope that you guys will find that useful, and we'll use that in possible debates or arguments that you get into. In very similar fashion, in 2012, the Stop Online Privacy Act, or SOPA, was something that had overwhelming support in Congress, but millions of Americans were against it. The news cycle constantly talked about how SOPA, how it was going to pass, how congressmen weren't flipping their vote, and then by people sort of organizing protests and talking about this more and taking action themselves to contact their congressmen and contact representatives of theirs, things changed. One representative switched over, and then another representative switched over, and soon enough, there was an overwhelming support within Congress to actually not push this through because they saw how much that this mattered to the people. Something very similarly can be done with the FCC's overturning of net neutrality on December 14th. We can come together, we can protest and talk about a lot of these issues, and we can put names to the faces. Days ago, news articles were talking about how this overturning was going to overwhelmingly pass. Now it looks like there's only one FCC member left to actually sway their vote in order for these rules to be overturned. I'm going to provide more information regarding contact information for them. I encourage you all to get in contact with them and talk about these issues and how they relate to you. Give them a personal story. Don't just use a template. Be meaningful with your words. I look forward to seeing you all at a nearby protest. I'm in the DMV area. I'm going to be attending the one on December 13th. And there's a link for it in the description down below. Thank you so much for watching. Please share out this video, and I'd love to hear some of your feedback.